Buddha, or Buddha Gautama, also known as Shakyamuni Buddha, was a great spiritual master from ancient India. Born as Prince Siddhartha Gautama in 5th century BC, he would have naturally inherited the vast wealth of a kingdom. However, the prince one day left the palace life in search of spiritual knowledge. After years of contemplative seeking, the Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. He then shared the merits of his practice by providing a method for other sentient beings to be freed from the cycle of death and rebirth. The rich treasury of Buddha's spiritual teachings on universal truths are studied and revered to this day for their deep wisdom and compassion. Today we would like to share with you the sage teachings of the Buddha, Chapter 1 of the Sutra of the Lotus of the Wonderful Dharma, also known as the Lotus Sutra. At that time, the Tathagata, or Buddha, emitted a ray of light from the tuft of white hair between his eyebrows, one of his characteristic features, lighting up 18,000 Buddha lands in the eastern direction. There was no place that the light did not penetrate, just as you have seen it light up these Buddha lands now.
At that time there was a bodhisattva named Wonderfully Bright, who had 800 disciples. At this time the Buddha, Sun Moon Bright, arose from his samadhi and, because of the bodhisattva Wonderfully Bright, preached the great vehicle sutra called the Lotus of the Wonderful Dharma, a dharma to instruct the bodhisattvas, one that is guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas.
When the Buddha Sun Moon Bright had finished preaching this sutra over a period of 60 small kalpas, he spoke these words to the Brahmas, or the protective deities of Buddhism, devils, Shramanas, or wandering monks, and Brahmins, or the keepers of the Vedas, priestly caste, as well as to the heavenly and human beings and asuras in the assembly, saying, "Tonight at midnight the Tathagata will enter the nirvana, or highest paradise, of no remainder."
At this time there was a bodhisattva named Virtue Storehouse. The Buddha, Sun Moon Bright, bestowed a prophecy on him, announcing to the monks, "This bodhisattva, Virtue Storehouse, will be the next to become a Buddha. He will be called Pure Body, Tathagata, or Buddha, Arhat, or a person who has attained liberation from the cycle of birth and death, Samyak Sambuddha, or completely enlightened one." After the Buddha had finished bestowing this prophecy, at midnight he entered the nirvana of no remainder.
After the Buddha had passed away, Bodhisattva Wonderfully Bright upheld the Sutra of the Lotus of the Wonderful Dharma for a period of fully 80 small kalpas, expounding it for others. The 8 sons of the Buddha, Sun Moon Bright, all acknowledged Wonderfully Bright as their teacher. Wonderfully Bright taught and converted them and roused in them a firm determination to gain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, or highest perfection. Those princely sons gave offerings to immeasurable hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions of Buddhas, and after that all were able to achieve the Buddha way. The last to become a Buddha was named Burning Torch.
Among the 800 disciples of Wonderfully Bright was one named Seeker of Fame. He was greedy for gain and support, and though he read and recited numerous sutras, he could not understand them, but for the most part forgot them. Hence he was called Seeker of Fame. Because this man had in addition planted various good roots, however, he was able to encounter immeasurable hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions of Buddhas, to make offerings to them, revere, honor, and praise them.
Maitreya, you should understand this. Bodhisattva Wonderfully Bright, who lived then, could he be known to you? He was no other than I myself, and Bodhisattva, Seeker of Fame, was you. Now when I see this auspicious portent, it is no different from what I saw before. Therefore, I suppose that now the Tathagata is about to preach the great vehicle sutra called the Lotus of the Wonderful Dharma, a dharma to instruct the bodhisattvas, or spiritual practitioners, one that is guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas. At that time, Manjushri, wishing in the presence of the great assembly to state his meaning once more, spoke in verse form, saying,
I recall that in a past age, immeasurable, innumerable kalpas ago, there was a Buddha, most honored of men, named Sun Moon Bright. This world-honored one expounded the Dharma, saving immeasurable living beings and numberless millions of bodhisattvas, causing them to enter the Buddha wisdom. The 8 princely sons whom this Buddha sired before taking leave of family life, when they saw that the great sage had left his family, did likewise, carrying out Brahma practices. At that time the Buddha preached the great vehicle, a sutra named Immeasurable Meanings, and in the midst of a great assembly, for the sake of the people, established broad distinctions.
When the Buddha had finished preaching this sutra, he sat in the seat of the Dharma, sitting cross-legged in the samadhi called the place of immeasurable meanings. The heavens rained mandarava flowers, heavenly drums sounded of themselves, and the heavenly beings, dragons and spirits, made offerings to the most honored of men. All the Buddha lands immediately quaked and trembled greatly. The Buddha emitted a light from between his eyebrows, manifesting signs that are rarely seen. This light illumined the eastern direction, 18,000 Buddha lands, showing how all the living beings there were recompensed in birth and death for their past deed.
That one could see how these Buddha lands, adorned with numerous jewels, shone with hues of lapis lazuli and crystal, was due to the illumination of the Buddha's light. One could also see the heavenly and human beings, dragons, spirits, many yukchas or nature spirits, Gandharva, a race of demigods, and Gimnaras or celestial musicians, half human and half bird, each making offerings to his respective Buddha. One could also see Tathagatas naturally attaining the Buddha way, their bodies the colour of golden mountains, upright, imposing, very subtle and wonderful. It was as though in the midst of pure lapis lazuli there should appear statues of real gold. In the midst of the great assembly, the world-honoured ones expounded the principles of the profound Dharma, or true teaching.
In one after another of the Buddha lands, the voice hearers in countless multitudes through the illumination of the Buddha's light all became visible with their great assemblies. There were also monks residing in the midst of forests, exerting themselves in keeping the pure precepts as though they were guarding a bright jewel. One could also see bodhisattvas carrying out almsgiving, forbearances, and so forth, their number like Ganges sands, due to the illumination of the Buddha's light. One could also see bodhisattvas entering deep into meditation practices, their bodies and minds still and unmoving, in that manner seeking the unsurpassed way.
One could also see bodhisattvas who knew that phenomena are marked by tranquility and extinction, each in his respective land, preaching the Dharma and seeking the Buddha way. At that time, the 4 kinds of believers, seeing the Buddha, Sun Moon Bright, manifest his great transcendental powers, all rejoiced in their hearts, and each one asked his neighbour what had caused these events. The one honoured by heavenly and human beings just then arose from his samadhi and praised Bodhisattva Wonderfully Bright, saying, "You are the eyes of the world, one whom all can take faith in and believe, able to honour and uphold the storehouse of the Dharma. The law that I preach, you alone know how to testify to it."
The world-honored one, having bestowed this praise, causing Wonderfully Bright to rejoice, preached the Lotus Sutra for fully 60 small kalpas. He never rose from this seat, and the supreme and wonderful Dharma that he preached was accepted and upheld in its entirety by the Dharma teacher, Wonderfully Bright. After the Buddha had preached the Lotus, causing all the assembly to rejoice, on that very same day he announced to the assembly of heavenly and human beings, "I have already expounded for you the meaning of the true entity of all phenomena.
Now when midnight comes, I will enter nirvana. You must strive with all your hearts and remove yourselves from indulgence and laxity. It is very difficult to encounter a Buddha. You meet one once in 1,000,000 kalpas. Each kalpa is a period of 432 million years of mortals, measuring the duration of the world. When the children of the world-honored one heard that the Buddha was to enter nirvana, each one was filled with sorrow and distress, wondering why the Buddha should so quickly seek extinction. the sage Lord, King of the Dharma, comforted and reassured the countless multitude, saying, "When I enter extinction, you must not be concerned or fearful."
This Bodhisattva virtue storehouse has already fully understood in his mind the true entity that is without outflows. He will be next to become a Buddha, bearing the name Pure Body, and he too will save immeasurable multitudes. That night the Buddha entered extinction as a fire dies out when the firewood is exhausted. They divided and apportioned his relics and built immeasurable numbers of towers, and the monks and nuns whose numbers was like the Ganges sands redoubled their exertions, thereby seeking the unsurpassed way.
This Dharma teacher, wonderfully bright, honored and upheld the Buddha's storehouse of the Dharma throughout 80 small kalpas, broadly propagating the Lotus Sutra. These 8 princely sons, whom wonderfully bright converted, held firmly to the unsurpassed way, and were thus able to encounter innumerable Buddhas. And after they had made offerings to these Buddhas, they followed them in practicing the Great Way, and one after the other succeeded in becoming a Buddha, each in turn bestowing a prophecy on his successor. The last to become a heavenly being among heavenly beings was named the Buddha Burning Torch.
As leader and teacher of seers, he saved immeasurable multitudes. This Dharma teacher, wonderfully bright, at that time had a disciple whose mind was forever occupied with laziness and sloth, who was greedy for fame and profit. He sought fame and profit insatiably, often amusing himself among clansmen and those of other surnames. He threw away what he had studied and memorized, neglected and forgot it, failed to understand it. Because of this, he was named Seeker of Fame, but he had also carried out many good actions and thus was able to meet with innumerable Buddhas.
He made offerings to the Buddhas and followed them in practicing the Great Way, carrying out all the 6 paramitas or perfections. And now he has met the lion of the Shakyas, part of the Adichas, a solar race, and as descendants of the legendary king Ichwaku. Hereafter he will become a Buddha, whose name will be Maitreya, who will save living beings extensively in numbers beyond calculation. After that, Buddha passed into extinction, that lazy and slothful one. He was you. And the Dharma teacher, wonderfully bright, that was the person who is now I myself. I saw how the Buddha torch bright or sun moon bright earlier manifested an auspicious portent like this.
And so I know that now this present Buddha is about to preach the Lotus Sutra. The signs now are like those of the earlier auspicious portent. This is an expedient means used by the Buddhas. Now when the Buddha emits this beam of brightness, he is helping to reveal the meaning of the true entity of phenomena. Human beings now will come to know it. Let us press our palms together and wait with a single mind. The Buddha will rain down the rain of the Dharma to fully satisfy all seekers of the way. You who seek the 3 vehicles, if you have doubts and regrets, the Buddha will resolve them for you, bringing them to an end so that nothing remains. We appreciate your gracious company for today's episode of Between Master and Disciples. Up next is Planet Earth, Our Loving Home, right after noteworthy news. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television. Farewell for now.
For more details, please visit www.suprememastertv.com/BMD.